star say, Jostle, jostle, jostle off my dog. Jostle, jostle, jostle off my dog. Jostle, jostle, jostle off my dog. What you talking about the day? At the night pod. Jostle, jostle, jostle off my dog. Jostle, jostle, jostle off my dog. Jostle, jostle, jostle off my dog. What you talking about the day? At the night pod.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for another episode of JASL After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin, and we're excited to be back for candid conversations every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Now, JASL After Dark is brought to you by Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, and you can also watch and listen to the show on JASL's Instagram page at JASL Info or on Facebook at Jamaica AIDS Support for Life. Or you can stay right here with us on the Bridge 99 FM. Now, Sade is not here tonight, so sitting in for her is the beautiful Kristen Leng. Kristen, hello.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Not a stranger to the show, so welcome back.
Thank you. And I enjoy it every time I'm here.
Yes, I enjoy having you every time.
Thanks.
All right.
So I'm Kristen.
Yeah.
And I'm a communication specialist. And I'm happy to be here tonight. This is my third time on the program.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Right. So, a new Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act was passed on July 3, 2023. So, tonight we'll be discussing the facts about sexual harassment.
To share in tonight's discussion, we have with us Patrick Lalo, Policy and Advocacy Officer of the Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, and Jamar Johnson, Policy and Advocacy Officer of the Jamaica Network of Seropositives. Before we get into tonight's discussion, it's now time for the hot pot. Okay, we're going to ask one of our guests.
Hungry. I'm
to the hot pot.
Juicy for eat. Away in the pot.
It's time for Hot Pot.
Hot pot.
Hot pot.
Hot Pot.
No, sir. This catching at.
Hot Pot.
All right, so there are always some topics that are interesting and somewhat controversial. So each week we dip into our hot pot to find a topic to discuss. So my guest this week, Jamar Johnson, from the Jamaican Network of Seropositives, he has already dipped into the pot and he's going to read it out for us. So let's hear what it says.
All right. There is a video circulating online where a woman was seen asking the Prime Minister to give her a donkey to help her with farming. She asked for this because... oh my God, I can't read this. All right. She asked for this because it is expensive to pay for transportation on the bad roads in St. Elizabeth. So question, do you think she should be given the donkey? And also, what would you ask the Prime Minister for?
All right. While Jamar composes himself, because he finds this donkey story so funny. Patrick, your answer to the questions. Do you think she should be given the donkey?
Well, I found it just as funny. I was sitting beside someone when I first saw the video.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is fit for airplay, but to be frank, I said, this woman have the ambition. She's asking for a donkey. But then the person said to me, I was like, why she don't ask for a car or a van or a truck or something? But the person beside me was saying, you don't even know if where the lady live there are roads to drive car, maybe just a truck, and she's concerned about getting the stuff from her field.
Yes.
So maybe that's what works for her. And then, so I
as well as
took back my
maintenance.
new ambition comment and I started to think.
You're going to license it, you're going to insure it at your
As well as
time.
maintenance.
You're going
That's
to buy
able to keep a donkey.
More interesting, the Prime Minister asked, where do I buy a donkey? Where do they sell donkeys? And then he volunteered the minister and MP
Yes.
to support him getting a donkey. So I hope she does. I mean, it's what she wants.
I would like to think that asking for better road conditions would be a better ask than a donkey.
But then
Right,
she
but
going
she
to
still
have to
gonna
live up her
Exactly.
100 pound of pumpkin, as she said, on good road. Better to have a donkey carry it on bad road.
So,
I don't.
So, Jamar, what's your answer? Should she be given the donkey?
okay. I mean, that's what she asked for. So I guess sure. I'm not sure that the Prime Minister is the right person to ask for a donkey still, but okay. As it relates to what I would ask the Prime Minister for in this situation, like I mentioned before, it would be one, better road conditions and probably tie in a nice little pickup truck, you know, to help carry the things. I think that would be a better ask. Yeah.
Kristen, what about you? Do you think she should be given the donkey?
I think she should be given the donkey. I don't think it is a must that she gets the donkey, but I think that it is something that can be considered. You know, and I think that the Prime Minister, as well as most MPs, etc., they try to be as generous, you know, and assist persons as possible. You know, I'll give them their credit where the credit should fall. So I think a donkey is an okay ask. I don't think it's too expensive. It's cheaper than a car, and you know.
All right, so I guess I'm gonna be the one to differ because I don't think she should be given any donkey.
Why?
We have this thing where you ask MP for this, you ask Prime Minister for this, and everybody feels to them if you get it. I don't subscribe to that at all. I don't think she
people pay
should.
tax.
Me pay tax to do.
All of us pay tax.
Yeah.
So therefore,
But
all of us pay
all
tax.
of us pay tax. So
and,
none of
and
us
the
should be
government
singled
is here
out.
to serve the people.
Yeah, you serve it by giving
so,
by
if
giving
the
us
people
good
have
roads.
needs, the people should be able to say to the government, I have needs, right? You are here to serve me. I have needs, and then the government will respond accordingly. If there is a service that you can be referred to, then right?
That's
if there's somebody at
protection
RADA, right, or some another organization that specializes in these things, then should be referred to that service. And if not, the Prime Minister can
Me feel if
gift
she-
her the donkey,
if
or
she want
MP can
donkey,
gift her the donkey.
She should ask Joseph, not the Prime
It's
Minister.
just interesting to me that in the year of our Lord 2023, people are asking for donkeys.
Well, since it's in the year of Allah. But I mean,
The lady's
we are
practical.
talking as if it's one or the other.
Big up yourself,
She
miss.
getting her donkey don't stop the road from
From being
fixed for
bad.
all of us.
Exactly.
So
Well,
we can all have everything. We can have good roads and she have her donkey.
I think
Yeah.
she's thinking what is most realistic and what can work out as best in that situation. Because to say, I need you to fix my road, please, you're going to hear that you're on a list with NWA, and when is that going to be? And you ask for a car, you have to go pay insurance and maintenance.
Yeah.
You have simple needs. You ask for what you need. A donkey isn't too
I
expensive.
feel like asking for the donkey and not a car. Like Patrick said, his initial thoughts was like the lady didn't have no ambition. I think, you know, she knows her reality and she knows what would work for her. So asking for the donkey, that's fine. I just don't feel like the Prime Minister need faith.
Is it the cost, I guess? Donkey can't eat what is outside.
Just
Anything outside the donkey
Just
can
go
eat.
down now, though.
Anything outside.
All right, Patrick, dip into the hot pot again and see what else is there for us to discuss. Dum dum dum. You tore it?
Tore it.
All right. And it reads.
Let's hope I can read this without glasses. Chris Brown will be coming, oh Lord, to Jamaica for what is this? BZR weekend. And the tickets are as high as I saw this, I thought it was not for real. 1.5 million. Do you think it's worth it? For what? Okay. I need some more context. The $1.5 million cover.
I think it's
It's
on
like a
his private
super
jet.
VIP.
Sky Suite.
Yeah, some
Right, so
Sky Suite.
Sky Suite.
Sky
And only
Suite.
I'm
That's
assuming
stadium?
you're gonna get to meet the artist.
Wait,
I'm
Sky
assuming that's
Suite
where his
where?
people are staying.
yeah,
Must
at
be.
the stadium. I don't know what is
Where is
in
Sky
the
Suite at the
Sky
National
Suite.
Stadium?
No, you remember, you know them.
I mean, I've gone on the grandstand for quite less.
Tell you,
so
for
I
1.5
don't
million,
know.
it must be the VIP of VIPs, and Chris Brown is flying everybody else out. All the other hip hop artists, there must be Sawiti must be there. Who else? All of these other people. Cardi B must be there. You know, Cardi B love Jamaica, so
Yeah.
Cardi B and
Right,
Offset
yeah.
must be there.
Yeah.
Everybody up there chilling, and we can go up there for the 1.5 million. But it sounds like it's one thing that you're renting though for the 1.5. It sounds like it's one space. So I guess you decide who you put in the
Right.
space.
And
Yeah.
but then I hear that the space can only hold 12 people. So my question then became, is it $1.5 million for all 12 persons?
All 12.
All 12 persons.
I'm not even entertaining the thought that it could be otherwise.
That's called a royal braffing.
Well, that
Yeah.
comes down to
Royal
100
braffing.
and
Yeah,
little
100
bit.
and much.
But are these spaces going to be created? Because I'm still trying to see where in a state
Where
those
the
spaces are. So if they are going to have some floating things in the sky,
Put it on the
It
grandstand.
sounds
I don't know.
A
But it
helicopter
couldn't be
something.
anything that is presently
No,
there.
man.
no,
It must be something on rafters. It must be up there
Yeah.
for the 1.5.
I don't know, man. But hey, do you think it's worth it? Do you think it's worth it, Kristen?
Again,
What
if
experience do you think would be worth that $1.5 million?
what is 1.5 million in US?
That's $10,000.
$10,000.
10,000 US.
All right. So if for $10,000 I was getting backstage access to the artist, so he's gonna come up there. He's gonna bring his friends up there, his entourage up there. We're gonna get pics and stuff like that. I think so because a lot of these artists, foreign artists, they're charging $1, $2, $3, $10, $100,000 for persons to be able to come backstage. I don't even know what Beyonce's own is, but I can only imagine, right, to come backstage and meet Beyonce. And I don't know, I have big hopes. I'm hoping, well, let me not put that out there and the people get here say, me say, somebody's coming. But, you know, those artists that love Jamaica and love to
DJ
come and...
Khaled.
Yeah, I hope everybody's there. But again, it sounds like it's going to be one space that one person is renting, right? And then you decide who is going in there. So I don't know if that's possible. You know, so if it's just for you and your friends for 1.5 million, I mean, if you're going to show you have it.
Tell you what, how much are we in the studio? 1, 2, 3, 4. We can jump up together and we'll buy one of the suite them. Want to say?
We can jump together. We can buy one of the
Still want-
bleachers. That is $6,000.
I still want
Right.
8 more people.
$6,000 divided by 4.
$6,000. $1,500.
There you go. That's what I have in my purse right now.
Wow.
I'm ready.
Well, whether or not you think it is worth it, I don't know. Viewers, listeners, let us know your thought. Let us know your comments. You can send us a DM on Instagram at JASL Info, or you can send us a message via WhatsApp at 876-551-55. No, that's not it. It's 551-5782. You're listening to JASL After Dark on the Bridge 99 FM. We'll soon forward.
JASL after dark. What can't talk in the night part.
If you are just joining us, you are listening to JASL After Dark, brought to you by the Jamaica Aid Support for Life on the Bridge 99 FM.
Yes, we're reminding you that the best gift is the gift to yourself. That's taking care of your health and ensuring that you know your HIV status. You can contact Jamaica Aid Support for Life to get tested for HIV and syphilis, or if you're living with HIV, to start treatment. Now, tonight we'll be discussing the facts about sexual harassment. And to share in this discussion, we'll be talking to Patrick Layla, who is the Policy and Advocacy Officer at Jamaica Aid Support for Life, and Jamar Johnston, who is also Policy and Advocacy Officer, but at the Jamaican Network of Seropositives. So the first question, Patrick, this Sexual Harassment Act and whatever, is Jamaica just adopting white man mentality? Do we need a Sexual Harassment Act here in Jamaica?
Yes, excellent question. We actually do, because sexual harassment is a very pervasive thing. I mean, it has been so ingrained in the Jamaican culture that people think, what's wrong with that? Like what? You know, don't want man call to woman now, or no, don't want people compliment people, is what you will hear generally out there in the public. But when you talk to persons who have experienced sexual harassment, you realize that it poses a certain level of discomfort. Their safety is compromised. Many cases of serious sexual violence started out with harassment. So, and then people has somewhat normalized it like it's nothing, and then there are people who are hurting or just pretending to be okay so that nobody harm them. So I wouldn't say we're just following the rest of the West, it is something that is needed in Jamaica.
Do you share those same sentiments, Jamar?
Absolutely. Like Patrick said, I think for so long, sexual harassment have been so ingrained in our culture. It's almost become a normal part of our lives. So things like touching a woman on the road that you like without her consent. I was in another parish the other day when my friend was walking, and this man saw my friend and decided that she was beautiful and was like, "Babe, smell like you," and touched her, and she was like, yeah, you don't do that, kind of a thing. But these things happen every day, and people think it is normal. People think I'm just telling you that I admire your beauty, and if I respond to say I don't like that, then you get cussed out because of it. So I think it's necessary.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Jamar, because actually I'd like to know if you could actually define sexual harassment for us, so we know what it is that we're talking about.
So sexual harassment is, and I'm going to give you, Patrick can give you the law definition, right? But it is any unsolicited sexual suggestions, actions. So it doesn't have to be sex explicitly, but I could probably introduction to pornography, unsolicited, touching again without your consent, having particular conversations that I'm not necessarily comfortable with. As long as it is unsolicited, there's no consent for it, but you persist in this and you feel like this is okay and you're making me uncomfortable, it's harassment.
So in other words, it's unwanted.
Yeah.
So Patrick, differentiate sexual harassment and sexual assault.
All right, so sexual harassment covers any unwanted advance that could be verbal, gestural, written, implied. It does not have to be direct to you, but, and let me give you an example. So for example, if you are in an institution or a place of business trying to get a service, and then the person offering the service sort of sexually harass the person in front of you, and the person in front of you went along with it and got excellent service, and that is sort of sending the message to you, say, you know, if you want good service, you're going to have to put up to it. That is covered. So it can be implied by actions that is done in the presence of the person. So the legislation defines it as any sexual advance, unwanted sexual advance made towards any person by another person.
Okay. And that's important to note, by any person towards another person. So not just men towards women,
right,
but women towards men,
right,
and everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes, that is it's one of the, not many pieces of legislation in Jamaica is gender neutral.
Right.
So this is one of them that has no bias towards any gender. Anybody can harass it.
Which is progressive.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
That is, yes.
I mean, all right, so new law, progressive. Can you, Patrick, list 3 things that this new law has provisions for that didn't exist before?
All right, so first of all, sexual harassment is now a thing in law. That was never a thing. So prior to this, if it didn't get to sexual, maybe the simplest of the sexual offenses, which may be sexual touching, sexual grooming, it almost had to get almost physical for there to be an offense. So we now have this offense that was never an offense before. That is one good thing. The second good thing is now we have legislation that now mandates companies, institutions, places of work, children's home, correctional institutions,
schools,
old age homes, schools, universities to have a sexual harassment policy. Every institution, workplace, home, and I mean home that houses people, not personal home, not a yard, yes, must now have a sexual harassment policy. It must not just have the policy, but the persons who are engaged at that institution or place of work must be aware that this policy exists, and that if they and that sexual harassment is prohibited on these premises, and that if it happens, this is what you should do. And then we now also have a sexual harassment tribunal,
Right.
which we
so
never
that was
had
very interesting.
before. The tribunal is the body that will hear matters of sexual harassment when they have exhausted the avenues in the workplace. So if you report to your boss, so this happened, and the internal systems chip in, and it is not, you're not satisfied that it's addressed, then you have the tribunal to go to. That is good in one sense, because our court system is already very
Overworked.
clogged.
Yes.
So if we have a new piece of legislation that does not have to go to the court, then that is good. However, note that there are matters that may come out of sexual harassment that may cross over into the criminal arena and may end up in court. Yes.
Okay, so Kristen, I want to ask you as a woman, you know, with this new sexual harassment act, right? Do you feel safer or more empowered knowing that it exists?
I feel more empowered, and I think safer will come with time. I think that as the government is placing importance on this and saying, all right, you know, I'm making this important. This is a law. You know, this is something that persons can be held criminally liable for if it gets to a certain extent. It will influence persons to think more seriously about what it is that they're doing. And while, yes, the court system is clogged and, you know, it may take a long time to get the justice that you may so seek, you know. Sometimes just the fact that you know that justice is out there, persons will back down. I think organizations will take sexual harassment reports more seriously, because I don't think they're going to want their name in the courts.
Right.
You know, so before, when an organization might try and skirt around the issue, oftentimes persons may make a complaint of sexual harassment, and then shortly after, any reason that can be found for them to, you know, have an issue that is found, and then they're through the door. Right, because it is easier to let go sometimes of an employee who is making an issue, so to speak, at the organization, than it is to let go of a manager who is tenured or something like that. So I think with this, it empowers employees, and I think that with time, that change will happen. I think it will happen, and then eventually we'll be able to feel safer.
So with time, we'll feel safer. All right, but you know, some persons, they might not see the sexual harassment as something unsafe. In fact, I think there was a female politician who mentioned that she enjoys when she gets the compliments and them called to her. She said she feels beautifully harassed. So do you think this act is not culturally relevant and it seeks to criminalize normal behavior, Kristen?
Seeks to criminalize normal behavior. Boy, let me tell you the truth. You see, if the gentlemen that were calling to the ladies were saying, oh, miss, you look so beautiful, or oh, ma'am, I would like to get to know you better.
I want to have your hand in mine.
Right, right. But that's not what's being said.
Right.
Some dancehall lyrics oftentimes are being repeated. You know, where they want to put what. And I don't think that is okay. And the fact is that it is bad enough that grown women have to deal with that kind of sexual harassment, but because that is normalized, young girls have to deal with it as well. And I remember vividly the first time that I felt completely unsafe being catcalled by someone. I can't repeat what he said on the radio, but I was 14 years old. I was walking along minding my business, and this man started calling to me and was walking me down the sidewalk. I was just about running, and I was in a public space where other people were, but I was so afraid because I'm just 14. You know? So I think that while we look at it and we say, oh, this is normal behavior, it's not oftentimes kind and sweet words that are being said. It's not, you know, that's not what's happening. So let's wrap it up. Let's wrap that up. Let's wrap that up.
J-Mar, last question before we run to the break. Do you think workplaces will be excited about implementing policies around the act, or do you expect them to be a bit reluctant?
I expect the response to be twofold. I don't think you're going to have a linear, oh, I'm excited or I'm not excited about this. I think that you're going to have mixed feelings, because persons are going to, one, you mentioned a possible defense that people may have. Oh, this is normal, natural behavior. Why is it that you're bringing this into the workplace? Attraction is normal. Attraction is natural, yes. But we have to understand that we can express attraction with boundaries. And also, the conversation about consent is absolutely important to this. And so, yeah. So I don't expect that everybody's going to be excited. Neither do I expect that everybody's going to be opposing. But yeah, I think. But either way, we have to move. We have to push out.
So, as it relates to the reporting mechanism, does that make provisions for that? You know, in essence, if my boss harasses me, who do I report it to? And if I'm afraid to lose my job, how does that go? How does that work?
Tell you what, Patrick, we're gonna hold that question. We're gonna run to the quick break, and we'll discuss that and more when we return. This is JASL After Dark on the Bridge 99 FM.
JASL After Dark. Oh, can't talk in the day.
Welcome back to JASL After Dark, brought to you by the Jamaica AIDS Support for Life on the Bridge 99 FM. Just reminding you to follow us on Instagram at JASL Info, on Facebook at Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, and on Twitter at JASL Tweets. We're continuing our discussion around the facts about sexual harassment with Patrick and J. Mar.
Right. So before the break, the question was asked, as it relates to the reporting mechanism, does the Act make provisions for that? In a sense, if my boss is the one that sexually harassed me, who can I report it to? Because I may be afraid to even say it to anyone at the workplace. I don't want to lose my work.
All right. So before I respond to that question, I want to go back to something to ensure we frame the discussion.
The context of
the sexual harassment currently is treated civil, not criminal. So it is not a criminal offense. It is the failure to comply with some of the orders that may come out of that may cross over into the criminal area. So presently, it's a workplace can get the report, do their investigation, take their internal actions, and the matter is closed.
All right. So
it's not
question,
something that
Patrick.
you have to call the police.
Question. You said a workplace. Is it that this act is specific to the workplace, or if me out a road and somebody talk to me about that?
Right, and I said that because the legislation that we have is limited to institutions. I want to say institutions instead of workplaces, because institutions cover workplaces, schools, places of safety, correctional facilities, children's home, old age home, all of those places. The legislation also cover domestic workers in your personal home, because that is their place of work. So if the lady will come wash your clothes and clean your house, she can make a claim of sexual harassment if it happens in your home, because that is her place of work. So it is confined to institutions, so it don't cover even the experience that was just shared of being catcalled at 14. Currently, the legislation doesn't. That's one of the shortfalls, we think, because we would have called for it to be broader. But currently, it does not. Jamaica AIDS Support for Life was very integral in this process. We made a submission in the Parliament on this piece of legislation. Some of the things we recommended were accepted, and some were not. One of the things we recommended was to outlaw street harassment as well, and that was not covered. So it's currently just confined to institution. But on the question of reporting, the legislation requires all institutions to set up a reporting system. So the institution, I think Section 4 of the legislation requires them to issue a policy statement. The policy statement is to clearly say there is actually a sample of what should be in the policy statement in the body of the legislation, which is very good. So the policy statement should say, this is the policy of the organization with sexual harassment. It's not tolerated here. Nobody should do it. If it happens to you, here is the steps to take. You should report to JMAR. JMAR should call in whoever. An investigation is to be done. You are to be called in a meeting, and they must have clear steps outlined who you report it to. Now, excellent question. What if it's the boss? Who do you report it to? The legislation still requires that you report it to the place of work, but you may also go directly to the tribunal. Remember, for matters, the legislation prohibits you from going to the tribunal until you have exhausted internal mechanisms within whichever institution you are.
Yeah.
Right. But in the case where it's the boss and you feel that, well, as we say in Jamaica, I mean, I'll get no justice here. So you can go straight. The tribunal will hear the matter without you going through the internal processes. Unlike with, say, it's you and another co-worker, they will insist that you go through the internal processes.
Okay. So, Patrick, as you're going through that, I would love for you to explain, based on the provisions of the Act, if a man can be sexually harassed. And as we have 3 males on the panel, I would also ask that each of you think back to a time where you maybe felt sexually harassed and share the experience.
Oh, wow. Well, the legislation is gender neutral, as I said. So a man can be harassed, a woman can be harassed. The harassment can be male to female, female to male, male to male, female to female. So any one person can harass the other. Gender does not matter in this case. I'll allow Jamar to share while I think about which of them I should share.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you for sharing. This is a safe space. Like,
as a woman, I understand.
Yeah.
So it's one behavior, but it happens in several instances. Yeah. It is several times I would have been walking on the road, and apparently you have this concept of, people always looking at you from head to toe, and their eye may be drawn to a particular section of your body.
What section? I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Your eyes, and them to say you have blue eyes. I don't know.
Okay, so your eyes may be drawn to your genital area, right?
Okay.
And you have this concept of a grow and a shore. I will not get into that conversation, but what I will say is I've had several persons touching me without my consent.
Wow.
Yeah, like, oh, this looks substantial enough, kind of a thing. Those, comments. And this has happened more than once. Yeah, so it's...
Thought I had something to share.
How does that make you feel, though?
Yeah.
Violated. Defenseless in a way, because you feel violated, but then you also cannot defend yourself, because the moment you do, you're labeled. And so, yeah, I think those two things were the strongest things I felt. One, violated, but I also felt defenseless because I could not say that I felt violated.
Yeah.
Because as a man, you're supposed to not
You're
feel
supposed to be
violated.
welcoming it.
Exactly.
Especially if a woman
All
tell us
sexual
that-
advances.
Right,
Yeah.
you're supposed to like it.
Right. And I see that's one of the things men don't actually share, the discomfort that these situations bring, because as we spoke about earlier, one, most of we think say it normal. There's that. And then two, the society and the context will make you feel as if there is an issue with you if you speak out about this, and you'll be labeled negatively for speaking about something which truly is offensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who needs to change that narrative, though?
We the men.
Yeah.
I think we need to... I know women are not attracted to every man they see out there. And neither are men attracted to every woman they see out there.
Exactly.
And I think that is where personally I find it problematic, when there will always be the assumption that something is wrong
Right.
with you for not being attracted to that woman
Right,
who is
right.
making an advance at you now.
Right, yeah.
And the fact that you shun, resist, or turn away, then something must be wrong. You really don't like every woman you see. So That's just a fact. I think people need to accept that. So I think because of the reaction we get societally generally, men don't share that level of discomfort that they really feel beneath when there are advances from other persons that they are not necessarily find welcoming.
I agree.
Yeah. So Jamar shared an experience, and I don't think I have anything to share to that effect. Yeah.
Well, I just shared mine.
Well, we live in a world where there's sexting and sending nudes, and we even use emojis to send sexual signals. So, can I be charged for sexual harassment based on me sending certain messages?
Right, and that was a part, as I said earlier, we at Jamaica Aid Support for Life made a submission, and that was a part of our submission. We wanted specifically written. So whether it be you write a letter, you send a text messages, and the legislation does make provision for that. So any medium by which the harassment takes place, so if it is, if the person is texting your phone and sending sex emojis, or the little purple thing, that's
Eggplant.
The eggplant.
On peach and
Yes.
and the emoji.
Yes,
Then-
the tongue and the
right.
right.
That can be problematic.
So the act speaks to harassment in what ways? It's so written.
So it says gestural. I found it interesting that word specifically is in the legislation. So any form of gestures,
And the finger thing
written,
the way they
oral,
pass
Right.
physical, yes. So whether it is said, written, implied, acted out, it is covered in the legislation. As a matter of fact, if I look, I have the legislation right here, and it defines.
What if you create a hostile work environment for others?
All right, so let me just read a little piece from the legislation for you. It talks about, now sexual harassment is any unwanted sexual advance, and then it defines what is considered a sexual advance. Sexual advance includes any one or more of the following acts, forms of conduct or behavior, namely physical contact of a sexual nature, a demand or request for sex, or for favors of a sexual nature, the making of sexual suggestions, remarks, or innuendos, the showing of pornography or the display of images or objects of a sexual nature, and any other physical, gestural, verbal, non-verbal, or visual conduct of a sexual nature. So that last part goes very broad
right.
to say, if you are even doing something in my sight that I can see, then it can amount to.
Jamar, what do you think though? Do you think, isn't this not an opening of the floodgates? I mean, because don't you think people will use or weaponize this act and say their boss sexually harassed them when this was never the case? Do you think this new act and the broad reach of it, do you think that's not the opening of the floodgates?
It could be, but also I think that is dependent on the training of the tribunal. For example, somebody claims their boss sexually harassed them, and it's a false claim. I think it is the duty, because as Patrick would have mentioned, the act makes provision for, if it is that it's your boss that's in the conversation, you can go directly to the tribunal. The decision then, and the probing and the investigation and dotting the I's and crossing the T's would have to happen at that level. Unfortunately, the person's reputation would have been dragged through the mud.
Right.
But I think it could be, but the tribunal would aid in just how much it affects the person.
And I mean, on the matter of floodgates, I personally, not a widely shared view, but this is always a consideration when legislation is passed. The reality is, the floodgates can open for anything. Anybody can go report to the police that you thief their money, that you break into their house,
Right, yeah.
that you do any offense
Whatever.
whatsoever, that you pull a gun at them, that anybody can go
Good
and
point.
make false claim as it relates to any offense that has existed from before. So it's going to come down to, like all other offenses, there is the issue of evidence.
Right.
And there's the standard of evidence that the law requires. So that, of course, will always be a possibility, but there is the opportunity to fix that. JMR reference the tribunal, and the legislation outlines gives strict layout for the makeup of the tribunal. So there are supposed to be 14 members make up the tribunal, 4 attorneys, 4 mediators, and six experts in gender, labor relations, industrial disputes, and all of that. So you will have a mix of legal and expertise in
Other
other
areas,
dispute
right.
resolution, experts in dispute resolution in the person of the mediators,
Right.
and then you will have other specific gender, labor, and other experts that can actually sit. All 14, it's 14, but all 14 don't sit over a matter. So the chair of the tribunal, based on the matter that comes before them, will pick out. So they say, Jeremiah, you have the expertise here. You will be one of the panel of 3 that sits over this matter.
Okay.
So you will have that level of expertise there to ensure that the case is properly ventilated, and if it is a false claim, it can be brought up.
Okay. Question though, Patrick. How does this new act work? Does if someone sexually harasses me once, but just go report them and I eat that?
All right. There is a caveat in the legislation which
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
I think is the whole issue of this is so much a part of our culture. Is everybody going to prison after
saw
this?
that, yeah.
So there's a caveat in the legislation that says the legislation requires you to warn.
Right.
So you must say that I don't like that advance, don't do it again. So you get off with that first warning.
Okay.
And the person must persist, continue to do it. So so the offense cannot be made out not having warned the person that you do not like this kind of approach. You must do that first. And then the person must continue despite the warning.
Okay.
I read that and I found it interesting, and I wondered if it would be problematic, because often in cases of sexual harassment, people often feel not empowered. So
Having experienced it once.
So how does a person that is not empowered warn somebody?
Which is why I don't think it should be there.
So
but I think it's
yeah.
a balance. I think the legislators sought to balance the need for the legislation and the cultural realities that exist.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think also while it is that, you shouldn't be having flirting and that kind of thing in the workplace or in these institutions, the reality is that a lot of persons do end up starting relationships at their workplace, and they get married and they move forward. And so sometimes the attention that is given is received or, is received warmly, and sometimes it's not. Oftentimes, I find more often it's not wanted. But as you say, you have to make provisions for that.
Question for you though, Kristen. You always dress up and you look good. I'm see at the workplace. I'm going
And
to tell you.
even this comment from Calvin, is it received? Well received. Because we made those
I want you to tell me what's an appropriate way to express this.
What's an appropriate way to express this? I think that when if you'd like to compliment someone, this is a key thing that I do. If you'd like to compliment someone, that compliment, try and keep it as neutral to them as possible. So if you're a man and you're complimenting a woman, think, if I wanted to tell a man that something about him looked nice, how would I say it to him? You don't have to use the same language, but how would I say it to him? Right? So if you say, oh baby, me like how you look, and all of that, and go into that. If you saw another man out and his shirt was really nice, he liked his shirt, he'd be like, oh, that's a nice shirt. I think you can
the
say,
shirt, the body, no.
yeah. So you might not say it that way to your female coworker, but you might say, oh, you know, that's a nice blouse, or you know that, or I like how you're looking. Well, maybe not even I like how you're looking. You're looking nice today. Sometimes if the relationship with that coworker, and I think that is where we need to start. Right? I think that's where we need to start. What the initial relationship is. If you are on a Mr. and Miss basis with your coworkers, right? I don't think necessarily it is appropriate to bring certain conversations in place. You know, if you're on a Mr. and Miss
that's a good
relationship level, if you can call your coworkers by their first name, you know, and you have a more casual type relationship, you can move forward with certain compliments and still keep them light.
Respecting boundaries.
Yeah, respectful. Nothing that would be considered bedroom behavior. Nothing that if your mother overheard you,
or you can't say it in church.
Right. Yes, let's use those things.
All right, but that's an
conscience.
excellent point, Calvin. I think that is where it is start. People generally know the level you are on with a person.
True.
So it is just totally out of place for the person on the road you don't know from anywhere to just think that it's appropriate to say that. So you generally know the level you are on with a person and what you can or can. I mean, I have colleagues that I work closely with that the things I'll say to them, I'd never say it to somebody in another department at the office.
Exactly.
In the same office.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you will know the relationship you have with people
Yeah.
and what you can and cannot say to them. And this thing that everybody is going to, you can't compliment anybody anymore. I'd suggest you can ask people's permission to compliment them.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And especially now that we're moving into an era of sex positivity and everybody wants to be sex positive, you know, and I think that's okay. But again, moderation is important, and knowing boundaries and understanding consent. I find that Jamaicans do not understand consent,
Which is why they
And
don't
it's
ask
problematic.
permission. So it's
It is problematic.
Jamaicans understand
Yes.
consent. They refuse to respect it. Because if a man is walking down the road and another man says, psst, they know they did not consent to that. They know, they understand consent. I find that Jamaican men in part, let me not say Jamaican men, but men in particular, Jamaicans understand consent. We know what it is that we like and what it is that we don't
We
like.
just don't care.
Do we allow persons sometimes to push our boundaries? Yes. Do we push other person's boundaries and expect them to be okay with it? I find that oftentimes that happens.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that consent conversation could be a whole topic on itself. But, you know, before we wrap up on this sexual harassment thing, can a person accessing service at a location commit an offense under this new act?
A person accessing service.
Yeah, so I got the supermarket and I tell the supermarket, the cashier say, why she come home with me after?
Okay, all right. Not the average person. There's a little tricky part of the legislation with that. If you are, and I'm still trying to work out in my head, why not? If you shop at that supermarket every week, why not? But what the legislation says is that people who don't work there, but frequent there in the course of their work. So you are the tin mackerel man who deliver tin mackerel to the supermarket every week. You are there in the course of your work. You can be charged for the harassment taking place there. You are the delivery man. You work with the cleaning company, which is contracted to clean the building.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So you are frequently there in the course of your work. But then the person who just come to shop is not.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's I'm still reading that. I'm still trying to get around that because I think if this is my supermarket where I shop every month, I think I frequent there enough to be
You
covered.
want to shop in peace.
to
You
be
want to
covered
shop in
under the
peace.
legislation.
You want to
then-
shop in peace.
So that sounds like a gap in the act then, Patrick. Are there some other things or other gaps you'd say in the act and your organization? You said JASL submitted some suggestion or they made a submission. Are there anything else you were hoping to see addressed that wasn't?
All right, so we're glad to see that it's gender neutral. That was one of
Yes,
our
that's a big
that was
plus.
one of
That's
our
a huge
recommendations. The second thing is they were proposing that if 12 months pass, you couldn't report the sexual harassment again. And we stood up strongly against that because we are saying, especially when it's a person in a position of authority,
Right.
sometimes people go on for months, I talk to them friend, when this man and my boss, where think me fi do, me no want to lose my work, and all of that. And before you know it, 12 months pass. So we objected to that, and they managed to put it to 6 years, which is not quite what we asked for. Generally, there is no statute of limitations on sexual offences in Jamaica, which means too much years can pass for you to report it. That's basically what a statute of limitation is. And they are putting a statute of limitation on this, which is another offence of a sexual nature. So our proposal was treat it like how you treat all other offences of a sexual nature. But they went to 6 years. It's a little win, not quite what we wanted, but there. I think it also missed an excellent opportunity to outlaw street harassment. So that's another gap in the legislation, being confined to institutions. Then it really does not cover where 85% of harassment take place. The data shows that most persons are harassed in the streets, actually. So it's a missed opportunity to not cover that. Those are a few of the things that I think are...
Okay, so Jamar, one of the oldest arguments is that when a woman dresses in a particular way, it's because they want to be touched or called to. Do you think the act will help stop this narrative?
No.
Absolutely.
I don't think it will help to stop the thought, but it's a stupid thought. It makes no sense to me. Like you're trying to suggest that a woman dressing. We live in a tropical country. It's summer outside. It's hot, and we expect women to dress in joggers outside. That in and of itself is messy. So say a woman is out there in her shorts, and I decide that I'm going to catcall and even touch without consent. I'm in control of my own behavior. That has nothing to do with the woman. Again, control, consent, boundaries, and so will it stop the narrative? No. But I probably think if there was the outlaw of
The street harassment,
then it could help to curb it. But I think no, probably have a little control in terms of people just understanding that, look here, me can see and like you and learn to control myself.
All right. So new law, right? And persons need to know their rights and all of that, and their responsibilities also. Will JASL or JN Plus be hosting any sessions to inform their staff and clients of what exists in the Act?
Well, we have done quite a bit on it since then. We have if you go on our social media pages, you'll see a whole series of videos where we cover different pieces of the legislation. But we are also having a legal fair on Friday of this week. So we invite everybody to come to the Transport Center in Alpha Tree, where you will be able to have the conversation more about sexual harassment.
And JN Plus will definitely be there. From JN Plus's end, we have a series of legal literacy sessions that we have with the people that we serve. So in that legal literacy session, we talk about laws and human rights and things that affects the community. And so this has definitely been a conversation in our legal literacy sessions. Persons have exclaimed that they learned a lot when they were exposed to these laws and the all of the things in there. So
all right. Yeah, thank you. So I want to thank Patrick, Policy and Advocacy Officer at JASL, and Jamar from JN Plus. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation tonight. Yes, the truth, or the facts rather, about sexual harassment. So I want to remind you guys that Jamaica AIDS Support for Life provides free HIV and syphilis testing, free condoms and lubes, and free HIV treatment. You can follow us on all social media platforms, and you can call us at 876-925-0021. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us tonight
for
this
having
conversation.
me again.
Yes, always a pleasure having you.
Yes, and remember what we can't discuss during the day,
we discuss after dark.
Good night.
What Black Star said, Jostle, jostle, jostle off the dog. Jostle, jostle, jostle off the dog. Jostle, jostle, jostle off the dog. Walk your hands up.